Houston, we see you on a stereo.
Conspiracy, lies, truth, helping you understand the lies of the world and see the truth of the Bible. Welcome to Celebrate Truth with your hosts, Robbie Davidson and Pastor Nate.
Hey, it's Celebrate Truth Radio, exposing the world's lies every Saturday on Revolution Radio. I'm your host, Robbie Davidson. I'm joined with my co-host, Pastor Nate Wolf. And it's kind of a special, I guess, week for Pastor Nate. How's your week been going?
Well, I'm officially 46 years old now. So far, so good on that. And lots going on. Going to the Cleveland, Ohio Flat Earth meetup tomorrow with my brother D.R. Lee. We're traveling together, and we'll meet up with the Baileys and Solomons and crew over there. And so, yeah, keeping me busy.
Yeah, but I said it was a special week, and that's obviously special, but something else special happened this week. I believe it was your birthday. And were you able to celebrate it this weekend with your family?
Yeah, we did. The only thing was that on Thursday was my actual birthday, and three out of the four folks in my house that work were all working that day, and my wife had to work in the evening. So what we did is we postponed the actual festivities until this afternoon. So we got to hang out together. We had a really nice barbecue while the weather held. And since about 3 this afternoon, we've been having thunderstorm after thunderstorm roll through Toledo, Ohio. So it's been kind of interesting.
Yeah, I heard the weather's been pretty crazy there. That's for sure. They're experiencing all sorts of different weather throughout the United States right now. We've got forest fires here in Alberta, and all sorts of things are happening. But yeah, there's been flash floods and hail. Yep. I think you experienced some hail.
Yeah, we got hail today, which it was hail and rain at the same time. That was weird because it was like thick droplets of rain and then hail. So, honestly, any weather can happen at any time. But in my humble opinion, there's a lot going on in the last several years with geoengineering. And I know they've even mentioned it. Harvard has mentioned all kinds of things. And so, yeah, it's been a really strange spring. So you just have to stay on your toes here.
Well, hopefully it's good for tomorrow. I guess that's when you're going to be doing your meetup there. And I know those are always very successful. You're going to be doing a presentation, I believe.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be speaking on standing up for truth. And it'll be kind of a sneak peek at some of what I'll be presenting at Take on the World 19, but really hoping to, take an honest look at what it means to stand up for truth, and then also give some encouragement from Scripture and some illustrations just to help us to understand, how important it is to take a stand for truth and to be prepared for opposition.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I'm looking forward to also in Dallas at the Flat Earth International Conference this year, you doing your presentation. Speaking of which, the early bird ended yesterday. Phenomenal turnout as far as the people that were getting their tickets last minute, as far as getting in on the early bird.
Nice.
Now all the tickets are regular price, but really excited putting together some last minute details. I was talking with my wife last night. We're going through some special surprises this year, and no Logan Pauls. We're definitely going to be playing it very safe, but all like I said before, that any type of special announcements or any plans is going to be brought to the entire team as well as all the speakers. So
awesome.
That's what I'm doing moving forward and making sure that they're all part of any decision, just so everyone's kind of on the same page. But really excited about all the conferences coming up, with Take on the World. I'll be just setting up arrangements for Amsterdam for the Flat Earth Convention there in Amsterdam, and then also FEIC in Dallas, which is really cool too, because I've been talking to Rob Skiba a lot this weekend, and I really want to get him on the show probably in the next couple of weeks, because we'll announce who we're getting next week as well after our guest tonight. But anyways, talking to him a lot about some ideas for Dallas, and he's already begun working on his presentation for Dallas, so he's pretty excited to present and put some new stuff together. So excited about that. Excited for everything that's happening, in the community. Obviously, we've had so many amazing speakers. We're going to have an incredible one on tonight, and it's always nice when you can kind of get to know somebody that you're going to interview. And I think it was last year at Take on the World was the first time that you and I had the privilege of meeting Nathan Reynolds, the author of Snatched from the Flames. Yeah. And from there, we were able to, see him more in California at Question Everything 2019. Yeah. But coming up to Canada for his first time, it was a pleasure to be able to not just be his roommate, but able to take him around and adventure around Canada and really get to know him. So I'm really excited, to have him on tonight. So without further ado, let's get Nathan Reynolds on. Nathan, are you there?
Looks like you're muted there, Nate.
Can you guys hear me now?
Gotcha.
All right. How you guys doing?
Super good. Super good. It's awesome to have you on. It's been a long time overdue. I've been talking about it for quite some time about getting you on. And it's great that we were able to kind of get you on after spending, I guess, so much time with you in Canada. We can maybe just start there at, Truth Quest Calgary, that we were able to, spend time together. You were able to present, and maybe you want to kind of talk about your experience and your first time in Canada.
Well, thank you, first of all, Robbie and Nate, for taking the time to have me on with you guys. It's a real treat to be able to join you guys for something other than, a 2 a.m. session outside of a table in California. So this is a real treat for me. So I really appreciate you guys doing that. And for all the folks that are listening in tonight, just a real huge appreciation for each and every one of you that's taking the time to do that. There's so many other places that you guys could be tuning into and checking out their material. So I appreciate each of you that's doing that. But Robbie, Canada was an absolute, it was kind of a total unexpected gem. There's no other way to say it. I think a lot of people from the States that have never been up there have no idea really just the opportunity of ease of comfort really in transitioning from international travel for the most part is pretty difficult and not an easy transition. But man, you guys up there were just incredibly welcoming, and Sarah did an excellent job of making sure that not only the speakers, but all of the guests who came to the conference really had an amazing time and a fantastic experience. But I think above all of that, my favorite part of every conference is actually getting to talk with people who, for the most part, are just kind of either faces on a picture screen of a Facebook account or other people on YouTube channels. And when you actually get to spend time with people behind the scenes where they're not necessarily getting geared up and getting ready to speak. I know Robbie, yourself and Jared and me were all in the same apartment, kind of getting ready at times, and each of us would kind of go into our own zone. And so most people don't get to see you like that, but it was kind of fun to get to see you guys in that mindset, because you get to see people at their most vulnerable in a lot of ways. And then what happens is people are able to see you and hear you and what you have to say. And Robbie did an absolutely fantastic presentation that I think folks really, really should take the time. If you've not seen it, I know I've been able to see it now twice, kind of at Truth Quest, as well as at Question Everything. And you just did a really thorough job at covering the basis for people. And I was just floored to be able to sit back and kind of be a fly on the wall for the different presentations that happened there. Jared Cressman did an absolutely exemplary job in his presentation of understanding the battle for the mind and really understanding the mechanics of the war within. And the absolute depravity that plagues each and every one of us that nobody needs to be convinced of, that we often do things we ought not to. And we often do the things we ought not to more than we would like to admit. And what is it in us that is inherently broken and causes us to be the way we are? And what is the deliverance that we are each of us needing in order to overcome those battles that we face? And he just did an incredible job at that. But I'll tell you, one of my absolute favorite experiences was, without question, going up to your guys' is kind of Rocky Mountain National Park, which was, is it Banff? Banff and I mean, Lake Louise in this other area just above there, about 50 kilometers away. I mean, it is an absolute gem, an absolute idyllic environment of glacial Rocky Mountains, all jagged and brutal, and frozen lake bed below it. And Jared Cressman and I decided it would be a good idea to hack our way through the ice and sit in that ice for a few minutes, and freeze our little butts.
4 minutes, 4 minutes to be exact.
4 minutes, okay.
Yeah,
the polar bear
somebody
club,
was timing us.
Much
to the chagrin of the 10,000 visitors that were there that day.
Yeah, well, Jared Cressman, he's been kind of, preparing and doing this for quite some time, taking ice baths and stuff. So I was most alarmed, I guess, and surprised at just how well you did by jumping in for the first time at such incredibly cold temperatures and sitting there, for 4 minutes. And, people could say, okay, that's incredible. But what was more incredible was after you got out, it was a 2-mile walk back to the car. And it was cold out. It was like 30s.
Yeah,
it was like 30s. It was like 30s, I guess, Fahrenheit. As far as Fahrenheit goes, I think it was around 30s. So just get perspective of coming out of that and not being able to warm up for 2 miles. It's just it's incredible walk.
Good thing you were moving when you came out of that water and just kept moving.
Yeah,
Our feet got all cut up. I mean, I still got scabs all over because we got chewed up pretty good doing it. But it was a treat. Sometimes people. I've kind of got these on-the-go bucket list mentality where I've lived a life that I don't deserve another day in a lot of ways, and so every day I'm entrusted with an opportunity to do something I could never do again in my life. I may never have a chance to go back up to Lake Louise and jump in the water there, and to me, I try to seize those opportunities when I can, and live this life with the absolute fullness that's available to us at any given moment. And Canada was like that supercharged. I was able to do so many of the things I've always dreamed of doing, and all crammed into like a 4-day time frame. And from horseback riding on the prairies of Alberta to blacksmithing and forging blades in a blacksmith
It was quite
shop.
something. Yeah,
it was just a real treat for me. I got totally spoiled in that way.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you had a really good experience. It was great to be able to tour you guys around and make sure that you got to see some of those sites. It would have been a tragic thing if you were able just to sit around Calgary and not do it. So for me, it was really important I didn't know what the schedule was like, but I wanted to make sure they could get you guys out there to experience it. And I'm glad that you guys both really enjoyed it. But for a lot of people that are listening, I'm sure they're not really even familiar, who Nathan Reynolds is. And, now that you're, I guess becoming a public speaker, is, obviously you're an author. But, what's so profound is your story, is your testimony. I wanted to make sure, in this 2-hour show that I gave you ample time here in the first hour to really kind of explain your story, because I think that will follow into hour 2, where we can get into a lot more of just how it dovetails into what you're doing currently. And we can talk about more current events then. But if you could, maybe you could kind of explain just a little bit about your story and why, being snatched from the flames is so profound, especially when it comes to your life and your story.
Sure, absolutely. For those of you who maybe never seen one of my other interviews, or if you've not been to my website at snatchedfromtheflames.com, you can see any of my other interviews. I've gone into much greater detail, much less detail, and explained a lot more of the mechanics of my story. But for those of you that are just tuning in right now, and I don't know where each of you is at, but I'm going to assume some of you kind of have a basic idea of understanding that this world is not all it seems to be. And that there are layers of this world that, when peeled back, reveal a very beautiful and yet disgusting side of evil. And I say that to be very frank and honest with people, that there is a seductive power to mystery. And there is a curiosity that is innate within each and every one of us that can cause us to wonder and long for a power that comes from the other side. And I say that to be very explicit with you guys, because there is no way around it. There is a beautiful side to the most disgusting, evil things in the world. And that is because people are inherently drawn to the things that are not so good for us. And at the same time, there's still beautiful things that can come through that process. So I was born in a family that for many generations has walked upon that narrow path that they believe is leading them to what is true knowledge, to gnosis, to illumination, to an eternity that is given to them through the wisdom that comes from Lucifer, as opposed to what most people would maybe specifically say the devil or Satan. It was very, very clear that people do not just worship the devil in a multiple varieties. They worship specific entities. And so my family on one side were Luciferians. On the other side, on their good hand, they looked like everyday Christians next door. We went to Christian churches. We did homeschooling. I bounced around to Christian schools, public schools. My family lived what looked like on the surface, and to most everybody you ever came into contact with, just a normal middle class, lower middle class suburban life. But if anyone really took the time, if anyone really paid attention and actually had an understanding of this world, they would have seen those gross underlayers all over my family. My family was stained in the blood of innocent people and has for many generations. And I do not say that in some kind of metaphor. I mean, in honest to goodness, my family or kinds of people that would slaughter and sacrifice people in order to gain power and abilities, insight and understanding, and political maneuvering abilities over their opponents, whether that was in a business ideology or whether that was done in a very physical, carnal, hand-to-hand, knife to a guy's kidney kind of way. And so I had been passed through this ideal. I'd been made to believe this idea that there was so much more power in the kingdom of darkness. There was always more power that was instantly available to you if only you would be willing to give that power the legal right over yourself. If you would give yourself unto it and basically join yourself and unite yourself to whether it was a demonic entity that was masquerading as a very powerful, prestigious individual, or it was a very physical person who was just possessed by a mentality and ideology that's caused them to do wicked and atrocious things to people for power and control. And so my family members were on one side very heavily involved in the Knights of Columbus. My grandfather, a person I talk about at length in the book, was someone who operated as a high order knight and maneuvered for and recruited for the Jesuit order in the county and the region that he was overseeing. And so what that meant is that he had access on a regular basis to children coming through him, and other families would send their children through him to be shattered. And I mean that in a very specific kind of way. If you take a child generally before the age of 7 or 8 years old, and you cause them to experience severe ongoing sexual, emotional, traumatic abuse, psychological abuse, neglect, starvation, physical beatings, sexual beatings, molestations, all of kind of the worst things that people cannot imagine. You cannot possibly think as evil as these people do and as sophisticated of a scientific method that is applied in order to cause a child to experience such trauma they can't physically fight back, they can't emotionally run away in a sense or overcome their victim or the perpetrator, so they run away internally. And what they do is they basically will dissociate. Dissociation is something that everybody has done in their life without either realizing it or even consciously being aware of it. But dissociation is kind of on a continuum. Think of it as a 1 to a 10, a 1 being very mild, a 10 being a very severe or extreme version of it. Most of you, maybe Robbie, have you ever driven home before from work and just kind of showed up at your door not realizing how you got home? Has that ever happened to you, Robbie?
No, I can't say it has.
Okay. Well, some people will experience that where you're just driving home and you're kind of in the zone. You don't even think about it. You kind of just show up and you're back at home. Maybe didn't think too much about it or traffic was light. It's no big deal. Yeah. That's kind of a basic dissociation, right? You got home. You did a very complex task of driving all the way home, but you've done it so many times that your body is kind of automatically conditioned to it.
Yeah, so I've got to a certain point. I've got to a certain point of my destination where I'm like, whoa, how did I even get here? You know, like I forgot that last 5 minutes of the road and those lights to get there. So, you know, that has happened to me.
Yeah, the daydreaming while you're driving.
Yes. Exactly. That's basic dissociation. Well, if you take that same kind of mentality and you put that under extreme duress in a situation, you can physically create separate identities within yourself, within your personality, to where the left hand doesn't even know what the right hand is doing. And so abusers and perpetrators have figured out if you traumatize children at young ages, you can cause one half of their personality, in a sense, to become the side that carries the abuse, the side that actually is traumatized and is readily available when the perpetrator and abuser is around. And so that person in a lot of ways becomes not only the person that abuses them, but then afterwards saves them and helps them and takes care of them and is their caregiver, looks after them, so they become bonded to that person. And so this is how you get a handler, someone that psychologically, physically manipulates you and controls you, but at other times has no relationship with you whatsoever. And so the other side of your personality that doesn't hold this abuse, that has done everything they can to avoid thinking about it, is able to go on living.
And so does one of the altars, does it go into almost a protection mode to say, like, to kind of protect the others? It does. Absolutely. Okay. Because my question is, you know, I've seen it depicted in Hollywood. I think when we were in Canada, I suggested Bates Motel, and I don't know if you've had a chance to see too much of it, but would you say there's some truth in that, where all of a sudden, like, one's kind of protecting the other and kind of taking over? There's kind of a dichotomy going with the two personalities?
Yeah. So it can look quite it can be very different for each individual, but on the general, you will have sides of the personality that are very much your protector side, the defender side, or they might be their guardian. internally. And what that part of their personality is there is to make sure when things get so out of control, a lot of times they switch over and take over and make sure what needs to get done is done. And so you can take that side, and a lot of times that side can become militarized. You train that personality, you work with that personality and take that anger, that aggression, that rage, that addiction, and absolute love for violence. Because ultimately, as you have to protect yourself, it will turn to a time in your life where it will turn to violence. Violence begets violence. And so the children of that become these protector sides of a personality. Bates Motel.
And do you think that was kind of the main? Do you think that was the main thing with your story, as far as that you were kind of being groomed for becoming, a violent, person? Like they were going to use that violence for their ends.
Well, I'll put it out this way: each child from these families, it's not that every child and every person that is ever born has the ability to dissociate and to develop full and complete, separate and distinct identities and personalities, and actually be able to do that. But some that do, they basically are able to work with them more specifically. So as I was shattered, as I fractured and the different pieces and personalities were pulled out, what they determined is, I had a propensity towards wanting to protect others that were being hurt or abused, or if I thought and perceived injustice was being done on people that were weaker, this protector side of me would rise up and want to avenge that. And so what they started doing was manipulating me and basically thinking that I could be the person that would put a stop to this pedophilia and the incest that was going on in my family. And
how young? Sorry to interrupt, but how young would you say it started?
I mean, realistically, in a lot of ways, it started when I was born, but the abuses that I can really understand and articulate well was closer to like 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, in that time frame that I could really kind of get a better understanding. Before that, it's really hard for me to kind of articulate anything other than documentation that I have, pictures and letters and that kind of stuff that I'm able to see. This stuff was going on far before that.
Sure.
But my family, in a lot of ways, they discovered that I had that aptitude and this addiction for violence. That if I could be allowed, I could unleash this kind of beast horror side of me and absolutely do whatever it takes to destroy the people that were put in front of me that I believed were bad people. And so that is what I got addicted to in no uncertain terms was the killing and was the hunting of men who I believe were monsters.
So they would basically say that certain individuals were bad, whether they were pedophiles or they had done atrocious acts, and that's the story they would give you, and then you were going to carry out your objective?
Yeah, well, it's a very watered down version, but yes, for all intents and purposes, you would be given. All right. So the Jesuits are basically the militant arm of the Vatican. And in a lot of ways, what they've done and how they've operated for many generations is by utilizing dissociative identity disorder within their soldiers. They call themselves soldiers for Jesus, right? Well, these soldiers are shattered and fractured individuals who have different personalities that are programmed. They go out and you'll have trainers who will literally teach you the art of killing. And it is a very literal art of deceiving people, manipulating them, coercing them, becoming close to them, and potentially becoming the person that they use as a sexual object, and then destroying that person's life financially and or physically. And so a lot of times my family was profited more off of that by blackmailing people, getting me to have pedophilic relationships with people, with grown men, filming and documenting that. And then they would use that as blackmail evidence against that person, not because they were necessarily already in a position of power. A lot of the individuals of my abusers were just somewhat normal people who were caught up in this world and wanting to climb the ladder and go to the next level. And this is the gate that they need to actually walk through in order to do that, is to engage in pedophilia. They document it, they hold on to that tape, and then they would be given kind of the blank check to their kingdom. And that is always used as a control point of leverage throughout the rest of their life.
Yeah. So I'm interested, a lot of times, like in the military, obviously, when they're training an operative or somebody on a specific mission, obviously they're telling the person, hey, you're doing this for your country. These are the bad guys. They're going to be harming people if your mission isn't successful. Is it something similar along those lines as far as causing you to believe that, hey, I'm one of the good guys and this person over here is the evil one, they have to be eliminated?
Well, so if you want to kind of break it down, you'll have a few different things that motivate people intrinsically. So there's acronyms like MICE, which are motivations for why people do different things, whether it's money, ideology, religious beliefs, like convictions, cultural allegiances, patriotism. And all of these become levers that you pull in order to manipulate someone, in order to doing things that naturally we should not do. Like, it is innate within us that we ought not to kill another human being. It's very, and anybody who's been through even basic combat training, anybody who's become a soldier, even a law enforcement officer, anybody who has been systematically trained in order to kill another individual, to take another life, you have to unwire a resistance, an internal resistance to kill another human being. And there's a physical distance factor that has to be taken into account for it. It's one thing to shoot a guy from 600 yards away and you don't really see much of anything by dropping a mortar shell on top of him. There's a distance and a psychological separation. There's a great book out there called On Killing, written by a colonel from the Army who investigated this exact thing in a much greater detail. But the closer you get to a person and actually killing them, it is a lot more psychologically resistant within us to do that. And so you have to be able to break down those psychological barriers and boundaries within a person to get them to a place where they're ready to do that. Well, mine got broken down, and my family basically sold and patented a process to scientifically break down kids at very young ages, rebuild them through this physical torment and trauma, and giving them militaristic training in order to become young assassins for hire. And that is what my family was doing with me, and started doing with other families and other children out there, was trying to teach them, hey, it's a lot easier to make a kid completely immune to killing another person at 5 years old than it is when they're 25 years old. So they start much younger than people think. Most people I know assume children aren't used for this stuff, but I'll tell you, it doesn't take a whole lot to inject a needle into somebody's kidney. It really doesn't. If you need to dose somebody and make them have a fatal heart attack, it doesn't take a whole lot of physical strength to do that. If nobody suspects a little kid walking around at a party is there to drop something in their drink and kill them. It's a very untold kind of secret in the industry that children are used in this manner and to this level of sophistication, starting at a young age. And then they're used in different capacities, just like an operative would be in the military, and given a dossier on a target, that person's properly motivated. They get the information that's available to them, and they go out and eliminate that target, or they go out and blackmail that person, or whatever it is, become best friends with that person and never do anything until a day comes 6 months down the road that they're told to, yeah, you're going to kill his children. That's kind of how this stuff works.
Yeah, that's pretty insidious, because like you said, it's, not only is it using and abusing the young, but it's a total shock. People would not expect that. So, yeah.
And people won't accept it. People will not believe it. It's inherently wrong. So wrong that people literally reject that as a possibility.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
They'll hear about child soldiers in Africa and believe that they can, confuse these kids and mind control these kids at horribly young ages to go out and slaughter people by the thousands and by the millions. But they don't believe that there's a sophisticated method of that taking place at their school next door, for the classes of gifted in learning. But if you start digging into these people, they have training centers for this all across the country, hiding in plain sight, where you can send your children to and have this process done to them.
Wow. And you've come out with this. Like, I guess the big question would be, how is it that you're able to even speak on these things if this is done in secret? And part of the Jesuits, you would think that there'd be death threats or that your life would be in jeopardy. How is it that you're able to write a book or even speak on a lot of the stuff that happened within your family and also with the Jesuit order?
I'll say two things real quick. The absolute only reason I believe that I'm still alive is because there is a hierarchy that is built within the spiritual as well as the physical order of mankind. And at the most high of all of it is not the missing eye of Osiris. It is not Lucifer. It is not the dragon. It is the Most High God, who I believe is Yahweh, who has written and expressed himself through his scripture and can be known. And you can come into a relationship with him and leave the kingdom of darkness and go into his kingdom. And if the Father ever wills it that I will be eliminated, that is of his doing, but it is not because of theirs. It would be because he allows it. I absolutely put my entire faith and trust in him and him alone. And if he sees fit to it, there is nothing that the enemy can do to us that he can't protect us from and deliver us from. That being said, I also was very intentional and strategic about, to the best of my abilities, the way that I brought this information out, and the way that I have also safeguarded myself with my own dead man switch, which I talk about it more in length in the book for those that need to know and have an understanding here. A dead man switch is basically if ever something tragic should happen to me, I die in a really unexplainable car accident or whatever else, that certain other people that don't know each other have information that is leaked to various agencies and groups in order to bring to light very, very dark secrets that I've been privy to throughout my life. So that is a secondary, more fleshly protective method that I've also employed to keep myself better of it. Right, Robbie, you had also said that you'd been reading the book as well, and the next chapter that you're about to read is going into details of, in the beginning of this, when I first started talking about it, an attempted assassination on my wife who was 7 months pregnant with my daughter at the time, where they tried to kill us in no uncertain terms. And before I had an opportunity to talk about all this stuff, before I had an opportunity to publish my confessionals and exposés on these individuals.
Yeah, I remember reading that chapter. I was in the plane on the way back from FEIC Denver. I was flying from Denver to Detroit, and I remember reading that. And I think I'm on about chapter 15 now, but it's pretty riveting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give, obviously, too much away. Obviously, people reading the book are going to get the full story. But if you could kind of maybe explain more, just, how is it that you were even set free? Like, kind of the story on how that all happened. With your wife, I guess at the time.
Yeah.
When you were dating. I think that's a really powerful point of the story on how that all kind of came together.
Well, there's no easy way to say it. Like, I was wholly lost. I had always known who God was. I had believed in Jesus as a young child. I believed that I could be healed and delivered and set free from this world. But I was constantly surrounded and intentionally placed around Christians that were weak and impotent. And I don't mean that to be insulting to those people. Those people were products of their environment, they're creatures of the churches they came from. And so many of the churches have watered down the word of God to such an extent that there's no salt left in it. And it is lukewarm, and it is pathetic, and it causes people to believe the story of the Bible is that God created this earth perfect. Man screwed it up because he was beguiled by the enemy, this dragon. And basically for the rest of life until Jesus came back, all of us just suffered and were miserable. Once Jesus came back, we got this punch card back into heaven, and we'll be miserable on this earth until we go back to heaven. Or your life is basically kind of worthless in a lot of ways. And that is the honest to goodness message that I saw witnessed, was that most Christians were miserable. Most Christians were weak, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and they were terrified of the devil. They were terrified of the enemy. They thought that if you even talked about Satan, that it was going to manifest and beat you up and tear your life apart, and he was just going to destroy you. And so they were terrified of the enemy. So I had nobody throughout my life that I could talk to about these things, that I could talk to about, hey, I've been a part of horrible demonic rituals and have seen the most evil things in the world be done to people by people under the influence of the devil and of his spirits. And I don't know what to do about that. So my life got stuck right there. And I never believed I could have a way out. I never believed that I could ever be set free. If I ever wanted freedom, I had to go to the darkness to get it. I could call upon it and have it available to me. But at that same time, God intervened in my life in such a way to get me out of the military, to get me to stop doing this work for them. And he wrenched me out of that world in a very physical and brutal, but much necessary way. And he planted me back here in Colorado. And I started going to school for psychology, and I was in a lot of ways trying to heal myself. I wanted to heal other people. I wanted to put my life behind me, and I wanted to bury all of it and never have anything to do with it again. And into my life, into that season, walked this girl, Chelsea. A woman who I knew nothing about, and I met her at a church community group I was going to at the time, and she got to know me as a man named Nate, and this life-giving, happy, bubbly kind of person, and all of that darkness and all of that pain and all of the madness of my past was buried away, and I hope to never look at it again. I never wanted to tell her about it. I never wanted anybody in the world to know about it. And at that same time, we fell in love. And, a lot of the beginning of the book is just kind of this beautiful love story. Boy meets girl and they live happily ever after, right? Like, That's the way it's supposed to go. But anybody who's been married knows that's not the case. Like, marriage is not the cure-all for your life. It's not going to fix you. Your wife is not the one who's going to cure you of your problems. If anything, you bring your baggage with you and it gets amplified in your house. And so I saw that play out, and halfway into our marriage, in a lot of ways, like, I'll just put it this way. I had made a deal to be left alone. If they left me alone, I'd leave them alone. And it was kind of everybody just let it be. I was a loose end that they couldn't tie up in the way they wanted to. So they left me kind of idle. Well, halfway into our marriage, they didn't think that was good anymore. So people tried to come and use me again and switch my personalities in order that they could have access to the parts of me that did this work for them. What happened is halfway through my marriage, I changed my name, changed my personality, changed everything my wife's ever known about me, leave my friends, church, community, everything I've ever been behind, and start getting ready to hunt strangers in the night and digging ammo caches and firearms caches in the mountains and getting ready for this kind of apocalyptic life. And
this was Jason, correct? Was it Jason?
Yes. Yeah. So I had a completely distinct personality that went by Jason, we'll say. That's the name I identified as and went by and operated kind of as a lone wolf assassin. That was really what I'd done for years as. And so it's very hard to do that mentally. It's very hard to physically be that in a marriage, because my wife wakes up to a guy who doesn't even know her anymore. And you can feel that. You can feel that rejection, that quiet rejection all the time. I think there's a lot of people who lay down next to their spouse. They've been married 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they have no idea who that person is laying next to them anymore. I'm not saying they're another personality, but something's changed in that person from the person you remember them being. And my wife didn't have any idea of what to do with it. I had no idea what was really going on. I just knew I wanted to be away from her. I wanted to be away from anything that ever felt like normal. I wanted this abstract, quiet, gray man life. And that's all I ever wanted. And God was not happy for my life to be staying like that. And into that moment, my wife and I conceived a child, even though after many years of abuse in a lot of areas, that was not going to happen for my wife and I. It was not looking like children were ever going to be an option for us apart from adoption. But God opened my wife's womb. And into that moment, I knew I had a decision to make. And I had to choose what kind of person I was going to be, because my father had made a decision to raise me up in that family way, to shatter me, to do these things, to allow these things to happen in his house and with his own family members so that he could grow his kingdom. And unfortunately, that is always available to people who are born into multi-generational families like this. You can at any time go plug your children right back into that, and you get access to basically the trust fund, to the prestige, to the phone book and the directory. Whatever you need done, it gets done, and your life is set from that day forward. And I was not willing to give up my daughter, and there was no way around it. I begged God, do whatever it takes to heal me, to please heal me. And it was into that time where I ended up at a conference where he radically changed my life, and I got deliverance from this spiritual stronghold that had been waging war over my family for generations.
Wow. Amen.
Well, it's really it's amazing when someone is set free, especially from darkness such as what you went through. You know, from an early age, pretty much like you said, from birth.
Yeah,
your whole life. That's all you ever knew, right? And then creating that dual identity, where all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're looking in the mirror, you don't even know who you're looking at.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and God also, the Father knew, of course, his plan for you in this second phase of your life, and he knew the type of person that Chelsea was, and that although, as you say, it was excruciating at times. I mean, she stuck with you, and she recognized at some point the Father's working, and so he always provides the help meet that we're going to need, to do his will.
Absolutely. And that was the big question. I didn't know I'd be sitting here, years from then, that my wife would still be with me. At that time, like I believed with everything in me, if I ever told anybody about this, I would die. Everyone I ever loved and cared about would die, and my entire life would be destroyed. And in no uncertain terms, that's exactly what was attempted against Chelsea and I, but we placed our life and our trust in the Father, and he showed himself to be our protector. He showed himself to be what I talk about in the book, the same God he revealed himself as to Abram when he called Abraham out of that ideology, out of that world that he'd been living in. He called Abram out of it and said, hey, you come walk with me. I am El Shaddai. I am your provider. I am your father, your mother, your brother. I am your all-sufficient, ever-present source of peace and truth in your life. I will take care of you. If you would follow me and leave your family. And it's terrifying. Many people like the guests you have on this show, Robbie, Nate, you yourself are a living witness of this. When you step out and follow truth, when you step out and follow what you absolutely believe with everything in you to be truth, this world will hate you for it. Many people in your life that you love, that you cherish, that you respected will totally hate you. They will not only a little bit, they will absolutely openly defy you and rebuke you and hate you with everything in them, because to you, to them, you are the enemy. You're the embodiment of insanity on this earth, and they can't stand that. You guys have lived through that in a very serious way, and that's why I respect so much the people in the truth movement, the people that are willing to talk about these uncomfortable topics and press through that and find themselves set free from deception. And I so greatly appreciate each and every one of you that's willing to do that.
Oh, well, I mean, I appreciate you being able to be, bold enough and just have the courage and follow, the Father's will in your life to come out. It's such a powerful testimony. And I would imagine that so many people's lives have been changed by, hearing it, reading it. When you are at conferences and you speak from the heart, you're genuine, and people resonate with that. I was talking with Mark Sargent just the other night, and we were talking once again about just you concluding there at Truth Quest Calgary. And he's done like 3 or 4 shows, and he's mentioned you in all 3 shows, Nathan, talking about this guy doesn't have a script. He doesn't have a PowerPoint. He's got no lines. He just speaks from the heart, and he's truly blown away. So he's been talking about having you on as well, and I think that's the thing is it resonates with people. People know that you're a man of integrity and that you do speak the truth. And I mean, you've basically paid a high cost, getting into your story. Is there anything else that maybe comes to mind as far as that was really extreme for you? Being involved in this family that, you had to keep these secrets that you really couldn't tell anyone, but you knew it was wrong. Because it seems to me like there's 2 types of people. There's people that, get sucked into this. They don't really care. Maybe their conscience are seared. Something's going on. But it almost seemed like there was this battle going on with you your entire life. You knew something wasn't right. You knew something wasn't quite right. You'd fall back into it. Temptation would be there, that desire, that thirst. And then all of a sudden you'd be like, yeah, but this is not right. And so I'm just saying there was that struggle. Why do you think, for you, there was that struggle where, and I'm sure you talked about the address book, but I'm sure many other children that were also involved, with you at an early age, being groomed or being programmed to do things in the future. So, what's it like for you now, knowing, that there's a lot of people just like you that were in these families that are out there doing the things that you did or, doing worse?
Well, I mean, those are quite a few really good questions, Robbie. I mean, the first one I want to grab onto is why was my conscience not seared, in a sense, right? I believe in a lot of ways, there's a lot of people out there who absolutely know. They know that what is going on in their family, what's going on around them, what's going on in the things they're participating in are wrong. Inherently, like the absolute knowing of wrong, right? Right. Men should not rape little boys. Like basically everybody knows that. You know what I mean? And yet families all over this world, all over this nation are absolutely finding ways to justify it and make sure it's just part of the way our things are around here. And it's a horrible thing to think about. But you have to normalize incest as a daily basis. You have to normalize cleaning blood out of your fingernails and what to do with disposing of body parts after things are done on a regular basis. And this becomes your normal. This becomes your Monday through Friday, just what we do around here kind of lifestyle. And so on one side of it, it becomes the only thing that's familiar to you. And I think even like you asked earlier, Robbie, about that show Bates Motel, and I did watch some of that as well. And I think they actually do a fairly great job at illustrating the insanity of what it's like in someone's house who is dealing with things like killing in their own house and disposing of a body and then covering those secrets up. And then the leaks that happen mentally, emotionally, and psychologically from and all the ripples in the fabric of your life that come from these kinds of things happening in your house. And let me tell you, those ripples just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I open the book talking about what it's like to deal with all the madness from your past. It's like someone throwing a gigantic boulder into this puddle of your life that was all calm and placid for a while, and you've leveled everything out and you've got everything kind of in its right and proper place. And then somebody's just going to throw this massive boulder in and destroy all the normal in your life. And Chelsea, in a lot of ways, my wife did that to me because she would share with me stories of her past and of growing up in, thankfully, a very normal, good Christian home, just a normal house. And I started to hear and understand I had a reference point to the absolute reality that what I knew was normal was not at all okay. It should have never been that way. And my wife would look at me when I tell her like stuff from my past that I thought was a normal like third grader's experience, and she would just weep and be like, "That's horrifying. Your mom should have never allowed that kind of stuff to happen. She should have done this. She should have helped you here. She should have taken you to the doctor. You know, like kids coming home with bloody underwear all the time. Like you should probably check into that." Right? There's some very physical realities to your normal life and having to wash blood out of your clothing that most kids in 5th grade don't have to think about, but you do. And you know it's wrong. At the same time, it's normal. And you know what? That's just the way it is. Go ask an abusive kid or abusive parent why their house is a violent mess at times and how do they all go to sleep peacefully at other times. You know, you have two sides of you. Every one of us does have these two sides of us. And mine warred for freedom. I wanted freedom. I wanted to get out of this. I never wanted to stay a prisoner, but I knew I'd been born in shackles. I knew I'd been enslaved to a system of thinking that could not break itself out of. And I knew I needed help from the outside. And so I sought that in the enemy. And you know what? I did everything I could to be the absolute best in that kingdom that I could. The enemy has all these delicacies they'll give you. I was deprived for attention. So I would get attention from the right people in the right ways to make me feel like a hero. And I would get the pat on the back and a ceremonial award that's in secret. And I would get all these things that made me feel like I was doing something of significance. And that was enough for me to keep going out and doing this stuff. But after a while, the luster wears off. After a while, there's just not enough of it in the world to satisfy you. And what's next thing that you go to is another level of the pyramid of power, and you get more corrupt and you lose more of yourself. And I wasn't satisfied for that, Robbie. I really wasn't.
So so there was like kind of levels is what you're saying. I know, you know, they talk about like the 33 degrees and stuff and Illuminati. Now we're talking about the Jesuits, but what I would say, like, would it be the same type of pyramid type system where you've got different degrees, like you're actually being initiated going further and further into higher degrees?
So you'll have, okay, it wasn't, so one, in the beginning portion of my life, the Jesuits were major influencers and purchasers of my services. Later in life, the Freemasons ended up coming in from my family. The Reynolds are a very powerful and influential family on the East Coast, and they're predominantly permeate a lot of the lodges of Grand Hall Freemasonry out there. And so that was kind of a transition point when I became an early teenager of getting involved in Freemasonry or being used in rituals by Freemasons. They do have a very systematic hierarchical structure that people can go look into. But on the other side of it, when you're working with what they call the Order, the Rosie Order, they have subsets of assassins in different groups that are absolutely a hierarchy. Like Group 40 or Operation 40 is one of the most kind of preeminent, prestigious groups that has ever been out there. That is also very unknown. But there's lots of vigilante assassin organizations that work for hire, almost in a mercenary capacity, and yet at the same time they are hierarchied just like the Masons, or they're structured just like the Jesuits. In that it's compartmentalized. So as you do certain work at the lower levels, you earn your name, you can earn a rank advancement, and you can go up to the next level, have greater access to more intelligence, to greater finances, and to more girls or whatever your forte is. So you're able to kind of climb this ladder and be more prestigious. At the same time, it's an invisible ladder that you climb there, because their goal, most true Luciferians' goal, is to not be seen. It is predicated on the fact that today they continue to survive today because you do not know about them. The only way they'll survive tomorrow is that today you don't know about them. That's it.
Sure.
They don't care about anything else. They don't care about anything else. My family hid in plain sight for generations right next door to middle class America all across this country, because people don't pay attention to people that aren't flashy and rich looking on the surface. But in a phone call, my family had access to huge amounts of money if they ever needed to. But they didn't use that to show off to their friends that I'm rich and powerful.
Sure.
Do you understand the difference?
Yeah, not wanting to stand out, right? Wanting just to blend in and then just become,
the wealthiest people in the world do not look like they're the wealthiest people in the world, because you become a target and you become under this scrutiny of the people around you. They'd like to be wealthy in their anonymity.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and I would imagine there's different like levels, or being put in situations where you're just wanting to blend in. Like you mentioned that there was like the Luciferianism that was going on, but also carrying on and going to church, right? Just like
Yeah,
you know,
dedicated. We never missed a church service. We were there on Sundays. We'd be there on Wednesdays. If they had a church cookout on a Saturday, if your mom gave birth, we were the family that was coming over with platters of food for you. And
So
Wow.
was that an outright lie, or did they
No,
was that
I
an
don't
outright
think so.
lie? So that how did they incorporate the Bible or Christianity into the Luciferianism? That's what I'm always curious about. How as a
Great
child
question.
growing up, how did you see that blending together, or was it kind of like, wait a minute, it must be pretty sophisticated for you not to go, wait a minute, I mean, we're going to church and devil's bad, but at home devil's good. So it's not like that. And I know that it's more Gnostic, right? Where Lucifer's a light bearer and he's the illumination. But I'm wondering, for you, how was it where they blended in Christianity with this Luciferianism and all the rituals that they were doing?
Well, it was not like Luciferianism at home and Christianity outside the house. It was Christianity and your, like I said, we called them daywalkers and nightwalkers. Your daywalker personalities are the side that's the goody two-shoe Christian-y side, and the nightwalkers only come out when they're in good company, if you catch my drift.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you're a chameleon. You live your life like a chameleon that changes its colors and its texture and it's everything around based off the environment it's in. So my family was 95% of the time you'd ever interact with them are just seem like normal Christian people. At home, you would see ripples of that other world that would seep out of the corners, but that stuff belonged in Grandpa's bedroom. That's where Nate and Grandpa went to do their thing. And it was compartmentalized and locked up and tucked away and not talked about, because family secrets are to be guarded with blood. And we don't talk about that stuff in this family. We do not talk about that stuff. This is what my dad told me after I started talking about it, was for this, like my family members began threatening my unborn daughter and said, for the sake of your daughter, you will shut your mouth and reconcile with this family. Right. So you don't see a lot of that other side. It doesn't really come to the surface until they're in that kind of environment. And as soon as you start to expose them for what they are, then you will see this shape-shifting, disgusting, filthy evil that's actually in there and in their hearts come boiling out of the surface and out of every crack and seam. But the most of your day-to-day life, no, you kind of, everybody acts like everything's fine. And if we just keep getting through this life, man, Rob, most of my concern in life was just physically getting enough food and getting out of my house as quickly as possible and as unharmed as possible on a regular basis. That was a win for me. Everything else I lived in a state of perpetual survival.
They starved you at home?
Not in the same way that like you would think of. You can starve children without people knowing it if they're absolutely committed to keeping your orders and doing your will.
Gotcha.
So you can. So
we got a break. Hold that thought. We're gonna come back to Nathan Reynolds. Absolutely fascinating, riveting, such a powerful story. We'll come back to Nathan right after.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back to Celebrate Truth Radio. This is Hour 2. Hour 1, we were going through everything to do with Nathan Reynolds, author of Snatched from the Flames. He was in the middle of talking about childhood and how he was starved at times. Maybe you can elaborate on that, Nathan.
Well, I basically conclude my book with talking about this thing called the hunger. And hunger is a tool in the repertoire of families and people that are basically raising their kids in an abusive environment. You can use food and hunger as a weapon just as much as you can use sleep or sleep deprivation as a weapon to break down someone's will and get them to be compliant with you. So food in a lot of ways was used like that throughout my life, that there'd be times where I was deprived of the ability to have sustenance brought into my life, or I would be deprived of things like water. You can't drink anything and it's extremely hot and you're put in very isolated areas in the desert and caused to basically go crazy until you comply and are willing to do what they tell you, or you shatter your mind and develop a personality for them that does their will. So hunger is a weapon that is used by the enemy. And at the same time, it developed in me this kind of insatiable need to see other people taken care of and to see other people, their needs met. And so a lot of my wrestle in my life was dealing with a lot of the challenges that came from these kinds of abuses. People don't really like to talk about, the different disorders that come through abuse like that, but it's a really important one that people have to talk about, whether it's bulimia or anorexia and a lot of the different eating disorders that come from people that grow up in environments like this. And so I do address that as well in the book for people that are trying to understand maybe a different way of handling that in later on in life as well. But hunger is a very powerful tool for each and every one of us, and it causes changes with us mentally and physically that are very powerful to change our behavior.
And so would you say most of this came directly from your family members, i.e. like your father and your mother, or were you passed on to other individuals where most of the abuse took place?
Almost exclusively, this was done outside of the house.
Okay.
Families, we would call them family members. That what the phrase family, just like in the mafia, the reason they say the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what the word mafia is. It is a group of people that are not necessarily by blood, but by belief brought together under a common ideology. Okay, so we would go visit my uncle, my aunt, my cousins, these kinds of people in my life that were family members. And this is where a lot of that kind of stuff was done. And so I'd be taken out of school for long periods of time or entire years under the quote homeschooling that I was getting. And then it would be taken to different family members and taught these kinds of things made to engage in this kind of activity. So that the summer was our hunting season, to put it frankly. And so that was a lot of cross-country trips all over this country doing this kind of activity for them.
And so, like, I never really had a chance to ask you this, but do you have any siblings?
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
And so, how is that dynamic now as far as with your siblings? Because obviously they underwent the stuff that happened to you, I would imagine as well. So how does that work now? Like, knowing...
I put it pretty frankly. I go into quite a bit of detail about halfway through the book when I deal with not only the family secrets, where I express how these things operate in families, but then I address how it actually, the ripples of it within my own family. And when I went to try to talk to my family members, I do not ever say that I know for certain these specific things happen to my other my siblings. Sure. I never talk about their story. I don't talk about I'll let them tell their story if ever they come to a place where they're ready to do that. Mm-hmm. That being said, I do that also to protect and insulate them to the best of my ability from ramifications and repercussions from this kind of stuff. What I know is what I share in my testimony. So I went to them and talked to them about this is what happened to me. I've gotten to a place where God has brought me to a place where I realize hatred is not the right fuel for the fire of my heart. Bitterness, anger, revenge, absolute abominable rage will never fix this broken system in this world. There is no amount of killing that can be done in the day to actually stomp out all the evil in the world. Correct. And so if you choose to fuel your heart with bitterness, it will imprison you and cause you to destroy everything you've ever loved in your life. And I mean that. But I've realized forgiveness. This is what the Father has for each and every person out there. He shows you that forgiveness will actually deliver you from that hatred in your heart. That if you can get to a place where you forgive these people, forgiveness is a choice I make on a regular basis. Okay, I have to remind myself sometimes to forgive way more often. And for some of you, you may not even be remotely able to think about forgiving these people that hurt you. But listen to me, it's the only thing that will ultimately bring you freedom from that hatred and that hurt. Yeah. Because they're not in prison because you're mad at them. You're the one in prison still. And I don't mean that to belittle anybody or to take away your justification for the feelings you have. God gave me freedom from that anger and that rage as I got into a place of being able to forgive these people and work towards that. I went to my family members after that and was like, this is how I have had deliverance in my life. I can't even believe how much it's changed me. I forgive you guys for what's happened. I forgive so-and-so for doing this and so-and-so for doing this. And I really want to see restoration in our family. My family, in no uncertain terms, my dad specifically didn't want me going to either of my siblings and talking about them, any of this with any of them. He absolutely forbid me from speaking to them about any of it. He didn't care who I talked to in the normal world. as long as my family members, siblings specifically, were not talked to about this. And in a lot of ways, that is where everything exploded, where my own family members are trying to convince my wife to divorce me because I wouldn't stop talking about this stuff. And because I wanted to see this stuff brought to the surface. I wanted to see the secrets of our life exposed, because I believe that's the only way you get healing into an area of your life, is if you expose it to the light and allow that healing power to come into it. But if you keep your secrets in darkness, if you keep these family quiet, we don't talk about what Uncle Harry did to we don't talk about that stuff in this family. Well, if you leave it like that, it will fester and it will infect you, and it will cause sepsis, infection in your blood, and it will poison every area of your life. And so I was adamant that this stuff be brought to the surface. My family was not, and they went about everything they could to physically kill me, destroy me. And then it was now in my marriage, and then they start targeting your entire support system. So Robbie, you asked, why am I still alive? Because it's a lot easier to kill someone than it is to character assassinate them and destroy them in every area of their life. If you kill someone, you make them a martyr. It's a lot more dangerous to have a martyr out there.
Sure.
And because everyone starts to look at what they had to say, and everyone will galvanize around that person and or their calling that they had in their life. And then it becomes a lot more dangerous. So a lot of times what they do is they destroy your social structure, the support system in your life where you find stability. Because if they destabilize you enough, they know you'll come back to the family. They'll go back to the hand that fed you.
Yeah.
So that's what they went for. They went for my church. They went for my job. They went for my wife. They went for my friends. They went for everybody.
Yeah, I would imagine that takes place a lot more than even like assassins or taking people out all the time, is because it just doesn't make sense why they would just go and, like, they don't like what someone's saying, they're going to kill them. I mean, they can just, like you say, character assassinate them, do a lot of damage, kind of like what Scientology does. When you revolt or you try to speak out against what they're doing, they have a very sophisticated system in place to literally destroy your life.
You. Yeah. Oh, to disbar you and take away all of your ability to ever make a living, right? Take away your reputation.
Yep.
Yeah. It's the same method. It's the same method because it comes from the same source. That's how the enemy operates. That's the fruit of the kingdom of darkness.
Well, because you're putting your name out there, but you're putting your name out there. So, like, my question is, because it's a big family with the Reynolds. Obviously, it doesn't take anybody that much work to find out, not certain people in your family, but who's who, right? So really, it's all out there. I know that I think in your book you mentioned that some of the names have been changed. Obviously, it's a true story, but some of the names were changed. I think that's what you preface at the beginning of the book, to protect privacy and stuff. But again, it is very public. I mean, you are becoming a public figure, a public speaker. You're speaking out on this. And, this is the stuff that a lot of people, hear stories about. And it's like you're coming out saying, I was an active, not just a participant, but I was groomed from an early age, involved in one of these dynasty, bloodline families.
Yeah. Well, and I opened the book out with saying, it is the glory of Yahweh to conceal a matter, but it is fruit of kings to search it out, and I put it in there at the first page of it in the foreword, that there is, in no uncertain terms, a code within the book that will give you all the details of everything you're needing for. This is a confessional, but that being said, it is concealed in such a way so that I can protect myself on one side legally to the best of my ability, and to protect all those that are still involved that are victims. Like, listen, I'm here for the survivors. I'm here for the victims of this stuff as much as the perpetrators. All of them need healing. All of them need deliverance. But I'm still in no way, shape, or form going to go put myself in such a position to expose individuals who are in no positions to protect themselves. And it would be wrong of me to do so, because they know no better. They don't know any better. They don't know better. You know what I mean? And so I do my best to protect them to the fullest of my ability, because I do love these people. I care about them. But that being said, what they're doing and what they're concealing and choosing to continue to cover up is evil. And it must be exposed, because God said, have nothing to do with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose and reprove them. That is why I do what I do, because he told me to, because he said so plainly in the scripture, not because Uncle John or Uncle Barry told me to.
No, I think that's really, really important. I mean, we always talk about the Illuminati or the Jesuits, and we're always kind of harping and talking about how evil they are. But I mean, we have to stop for a second and think, well, wait a minute, God's going to send someone to actually, respond to them. And I mean, it's amazing that you might be that person. Obviously, your heart and desire for people that are affected with, that trauma, but also the people that are actually carrying these acts out, the family members, in dynasty families. And someone has to be out there to reach them with the gospel. people, right? And it's so powerful that anybody, man. I mean, if you could take someone like you that was, doing the acts that you've done throughout your life and change your heart, can change anyone's heart. And that's I guess the bottom line of this story. And it's amazing that I don't know how long and what that turmoil was like, getting to a point where you could truly forgive the people that had done these heinous things to you. But what an incredible thing, forgiveness is, like you talked about, how it does truly set you free.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Amen.
And it is power. Forgiveness is a powerful tool. It is a weapon. And I mean that. Like when the Father forgives us and cleanses us, it is an impossible reality to have happen to someone who is stained as deeply as I was. I knew, Robbie, I knew, Nate, with absolute certainty, my depravity, the capabilities of evil that could come out of my hands. I knew that.
Yeah.
I know no one had to. I didn't need a preacher to convince me that evil was real. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a lot of people who today, or who may someday listen to this, who don't need anybody convince them that they are intrinsically broken and are susceptible to very sick and disgusting things in the right circumstances. And every one of us is capable of it. And if we distance ourselves from that, we are liars and the truth is not in us. But I absolutely believe that forgiveness, repenting, asking God that, hey, listen, I don't want to be a part of this. I want a new life. I want to have something different. I don't want to be held captive by these things that I do that I can't stop. I don't want to be angry anymore. I don't want to be mad at my kids all the time. I don't want to be depressed about going to work or getting home every day. I don't want to be miserable anymore. God will cleanse these areas of our life and give us a new purpose. He will restart in us a plan that he prepared from us before the foundations of the world to have a good purpose and produce good things in this world in accordance with his will. He'll give that to us. He's always waiting to anyone who's willing to accept that. But you know what? The vast majority of people who are in that scaly other world will not listen to people who come from the normal world. They won't listen to you. They don't respect you. And I don't say that to demean you. That you have no common ground. You come from
it makes sense.
world.
It makes sense. It's like if you're gonna talk to a gang member, it helps if you kind of live the life. Like I totally understand what you're talking about. I mean, I've been in a lot of witnessing encounters, and it makes sense that sometimes it helps to be able to relate.
Totally.
Yeah, and Nate, I have a question for you. Kind of stemming from the principle that you brought up. The mandate in Scripture that you grabbed a hold of and said, this is for me too. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11, where it says, have no fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. Some versions say expose them. And I was just wondering, I imagine that, you did some things in breaking free from the bonds that you were under and the authorities and the control. And in doing so, you didn't just try to get away, but you exposed that, and first and foremost, you publicly exposed some of the evil things that you had done in your own life. And so my question is, did that in some way help to disarm their ability, to get to you? Was that a surprise to them? And because, like you said, there's all these, evidence of things, deeds that were done. And a lot of times they use those things, against you to try to silence you or try to control you. So, my question is, how much was your openness and you're just exposing the darkness, even in your own deeds? How much of that was either a surprise to them or just a defensive ability for you?
Well, honestly, I really believe if we ever want to actually fight back against evil, the best thing we can ever do is study the one who conquered evil. And there's one who came in the flesh, who is the Word who became flesh, who made his dwelling among us, who walked on this earth, suffered and was tormented by every affliction we can possibly imagine, who was debased at a level that is inhuman. And yet, even in that, he did not give in to the temptations of the wicked one when he came to him to tempt him to do things he ought not to with power that had been entrusted to him. And the way he defeated the enemy, the way he defeated the dragon, was he disarmed him. He disarmed him in a very strategic way. And that is what I saw in the Scripture from beginning to end, was the way that the Father dealt with the enemy. And he did that by using, honestly, what he did is he would expose what was going on And the enemy likes to speak in what I call double speak. It's the forked tongue of the serpent. Out of one side of it comes truth. Out of the other side of it comes absolute lies. He's the conception point of lies. Okay. He's the father of them. But that being said, he also speaks the truth. We see him quoting scripture as his own weapon against the Messiah in a very critical moment in his life. And yet he reproves him. He reproves him with scripture that was true and on point, and he did not step outside of his boundaries. But that being said, I saw and looked through scripture, and I saw that the way that we are supposed to do this is to expose our sins, expose them, reveal them. It says, confess your sins to one another that you may be healed in James. Yes. What he's talking about is not that you need a priest, some guy in a confessional booth who's like some mafia don who you go tell all your dirty laundry to, who then goes and uses that as blackmail and control points all around your world. That is not what he had intention. What he means by that is, listen, there's going to come stuff in your life that you are going to have to deal with. And you need to make sure that that dirty laundry of yours doesn't come around and whip you in the face all the time. Anytime you've got a bad day, you know what I mean? So what I talk about it in there. I had an absolute addiction to sexual pornography from a very early age that was exposed to me and became a huge stronghold in my life for years. I had all kinds of issues that came up throughout my life. I air it all out in the book. Any of the mental issues, any of the attacks, physical, financial, emotional, I lay all of my faults out in this book. I lay it out before the world because I know by doing that, I extinguish those fiery arrows from being shot at it against me later on. I'm only as dirty as my darkest secret, right? So why don't I tell everybody my worst secret and let it be as it is? Because sooner or later, everything I've ever done will be exposed, promised and guaranteed by the Creator himself. Says everything we've ever done, everything we've ever said in secret will be spoken from the mountains. Every act we've ever done, whether you thought it was in the bottom of the pit of hell and concealed from every eye, everything you've done will be exposed and shown to the world. And it will be judged on your intent and the decisions that you made to do that. I know that day is coming for me. I chose to make do with that now. I chose to own up to it now rather than wait and continue to live in this fear and in this control state, because that is how the enemy controls us, through fear, guilt, and shame. And if you can defeat him by exposing yourself, by humbling yourself, by allowing the Father to start working in these areas of your life, you destroy those strongholds from your life ever taking root again.
Amen. Yeah. Wow, that's powerful.
And would you say like when it came to like all the things that you've kind of been involved with, would you say the majority or what percentage would be involved like when you talk about the military? Because you obviously, I mean, being in the military, if you're ordered to do something, you do it. And a lot of soldiers do things that maybe they regret. But I guess the question I have for you is, I'm sure there was a lot of things done, not just by you, but even other, members of your family. And I guess the question is, what about justice here? You talk about forgiveness, which I think is wonderful, but also what about justice? What about things that you've done? Like, do you ever look at it that way and say, like, I wonder, is it so blurry? Is it so clouded that there's really no way you could ever serve justice, like prison time, or someone of your family could serve prison time for the stuff they've done, or not enough evidence? Like, I'm just curious on that angle. Like, what about justice? What about justice when it comes to the things that are being done, not only by you, but also obviously by your family?
It's a tangled web, unfortunately, when you start to ask about justice and trying to seek justice in the systems of man. And unfortunately, like I talk about in the book, what do you do, Robbie, when you're going through these situations and the chief of police is one of your primary perpetrators and abusers? Correct. What do you do when the prosecuting attorney comes in and has sex with your family member in front of you, and they tell you, go ahead and press charges against so-and-so? My family members are all very often more than happy for people to press charges against them, because on one side of it, they have more finances and legal authority than you can possibly get your head around to eat your lunch when it comes to you trying to go after people that are perpetrators of this. Why is it that in almost every circumstance when a perpetrator is being charged with sexual crimes or sexual misconduct or anything like this, why is it that the victim almost in every circumstance ends up going down for it? The victim is go ahead and study what happened in Boys Town and all of the Catholic recruitment arm for the pedophilia rings that were running out of the White House and Congress in the 80s. The head of the Republican Party at the time is being brought up on charges for not running children like he was doing and bringing little boys into the White House and funneling all the pedophilia there. But he's brought up on charges of money laundering and financial problems. And ultimately, nothing really comes of it. But the victims who came out and spoke out against it all of them went to jail. All of them went to prison.
Oh yeah.
And that's the system that you're facing.
Sure.
I'm supposed to go up against and bring to court cases of abuse when the judge and or the person who's bringing this to them has sworn an oath, but with a sword at his throat, that he will protect a fellow brotherhood member no matter what the crime is. They will cover it up. They've sworn blood oaths in order to ensure that this system they've built maintains the status quo. And anything that comes along against that, they absolutely have no business with. I would love true justice to be done. I would be eager to be a participant in that process. Unfortunately, Robbie, Nate, that system is so controlled and manipulated and politicked that there is not justice in my country. There is not justice apart from the giver of justice, who is the Most High God. If he sees fit to it, Robbie, I could absolutely end up in a prison cell for what I've done. In no uncertain terms, I could be executed in many of the places that I've done these things for. And if that be my will, if that's what he has for me, Robbie, I have to own that, because that is my bed. You know, if I live by the sword, I may die by the sword. And you know what? But let me make sure I die for the right reasons this time.
Sure. Yeah.
If I'm going to be burned at the stake, that's what I want it to be for. Because I spoke the truth and because I wouldn't keep the secrets.
Amen.
And that's the reason I brought that up, is obviously when it came to justice, is I know that it's so interconnected. We're talking to judges, politicians, you know, like you said, captain, you know, police, you know, generals. I mean, this is very sophisticated, very high level. So I guess that's the question. I mean, justice will be served in the end. I mean, like it says very clearly, that it is mine to revenge. It's not for us to, you know, seek revenge and get vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I believe. I forget what verse exactly that is.
Right.
Amen.
But you're right. And that's one thing that we can always, like, you know, look to, is that it will always, justice will always be served, especially when we're dealing with not just a loving and forgiving God, but also a God that is full of justice, right? He's a very just God. And obviously he doesn't, you know, look kindly to innocent blood being shed. And he hates it for sure.
And also the power of grace, you know, just to understand that, you know, Paul, he said, hey, I'm the chief of sinners. You know, I mean, there were faithful believers that were persecuted and tortured and killed because he was the initiator. He was the pursuer.
Yes,
you know, he was the one who was
murder a man?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so I mean, I can only imagine, you know, with the grace that you feel from the Father, knowing your sin, but also knowing that the blood of Jesus is powerful enough to wash away all of those sins. Absolutely. So, you know, what a powerful testimony as well. You know, I think it's admirable that you're saying, hey, man, you know, I recognize my deeds, you know, and if I have to pay some physical penalty in this life, you know, some consequence, because we can be forgiven for almost all things, you know, other than, you know, the blaspheming of the Holy Spirit. And of course, that would be a whole episode to talk about what that means. But it's powerful to know that, you know, there is grace, there is mercy, there is forgiveness. And, you know, Romans 8:1 is such a powerful verse, just talking about, you know, therefore now there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And, you know, condemnation is the result of being judged, you know, and found wanting. And so to not have to fear that condemnation from God, at least from the Father, must be an amazing feeling.
Well, it's absolutely true. Absolutely. It's worth it.
Absolutely. It must have taken like a long, I don't know what that process was like for you, but you know, they say a lot of times, sometimes it's the hardest thing to forgive yourself, you know, that it's just so hard. And what was it like for you? You're still on that road? Because I was going to ask you, it was just like, you know, from all the stuff, you know, at what point, you know, have you really felt, you know, truly forgiven? Or like you said, you're still on that road. So you're still moving that direction of being.
Well, yeah, if I was honest, you know, honestly, Robbie, like for those of you that don't know, my wife and I, like, we sold our place. We moved full time into an RV and started traveling all over the country. And along that journey, you know, we kind of posted videos along our Chronicle on our YouTube channel, and it was an incredible experience. And at the same time, when you move every bit of your life into a tiny little, you know, bus on wheels for all intents and purposes, all your junk comes to the surface. And I really struggled with the fact that I felt like I really didn't love and cherish my family. You know, my wife and my daughter, in this life that I had that was supposed to be part of the blessing, that you can live a normal life, but at the same time, it felt like a curse for me from the life I was used to and the type of mentality of what normal Monday through Friday living was like in my house growing up, feeling so distant and disconnected from that and feeling embittered towards it. And I realized I had no ability to truly love people because I could not love even myself. I could not forgive myself for all these things. At the end of the day, yeah, Robbie, that's an ongoing process, man, is to forgive myself because I'm the only one that knows, and the Father, the only one that know really what I was a part of and what I've done and what I'm capable of. And at the end of the day, that's the hardest person to forgive is the man in the mirror. Yeah. You know, but I can't, but he who loves much, he who's forgiven much will love much, you know, I know I've been forgiven much. I love a lot of people.
No, I love that about you, that you're honest.
That.
No, I love the fact that you're honest on that, because, you know, I've talked to a lot of people, and, you know, sometimes it takes years and years and years, but the thing is you're on that road, and the beautiful thing is there is definitely a light at the end of that tunnel, and you will be completely set free, where you can absolutely, you know, not only just forgive things that were done to you, but you can completely forgive yourself for the things that you did to other people completely, and know that you're totally washed clean, totally 100% washed. Will not, you know, a beautiful verse is when he will not remember, you know, it is completely gone. I mean, just, that's an incredible verse, because it's just like, it's gone. It doesn't even exist anymore. It's like, really? Like, it doesn't, but it happened. No, it's gone. It's completely 100% washed, you know, like you're white as snow, as it says, which is a beautiful thing.
Because, you know, we can, you know, forgive, but, you know, we have such a difficult time forgetting, you know, and he literally says, I will remember your sins no more.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I will forget. Like, I will forget. Like, they're like completely blotched out, like gone. You know what I mean? It's just, that's an incredible thing. I can't tell you how many times I've been with individuals where they've said, man, like, no, I've done too many bad things, you know, God couldn't forgive me, you know, and I've been like trying to explain to them, you know, and you brought up before, Pastor Nate, you know, with Paul, you know, here's a guy going around executing Christians, right? And I'm like, look, you're not around, you know, ordering the deaths of Christians. And I mean, you know what happens with Saul turning to Paul, but a lot of people believe that. And I think it's important that, you know, you're bringing this up, Nathan, as far as your story, because a lot of people involved in the occult and deep level, you know, Luciferian type agreements and death pacts and blood pacts, they really truly believe that they've signed their soul. It's over. Absolutely. It's too late. It's too late. Yeah. I can't turn. I've already signed my soul off. You know, I've talked to people before where they're like, it's too late. And you see this in the music industry, Hollywood, where even in their words, they say this. It's just like, no, it's done. I can't. And it's like, I wish they would not believe that lie, because there's nothing, you know, as far as, you know, if you sign your soul over to the devil, the fact is he likes to whisper and say, no, you're mine, but that's not the truth at all. It's not the truth at all. You could be set free from anything, you know, especially any type of involvement in the occult or Satanism, even signing your, you know, for fame, for money and power, you know, like a lot of music artists have done throughout the ages, where they've literally signed, you know, their souls over to the devil, you know, for fame and for power. But the tragic thing is, when you get them on record, they say, like, man, it's too late. I signed, you know, I can't, you know, I won't be accepted. And it's just like, wow, but that's the beautiful thing. I mean, we have a beautiful Father that will forgive, you know, obviously through his Son. And he's the one that is the perfect sacrifice, and be able to cover of be able to wash us clean. You know, that forgiveness is a beautiful thing. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I mean, it talks about the precious blood. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I said that very specifically to people that were in there, and I go over that moment in my life when I was a young man and had the opportunity to be imbued with a different kind of power that could give me vengeance on my enemies, and I gave myself over to this power for that reason, thinking that it would make me invincible for them, you know. But that being said, like, you make a deal, you make a physical, spiritual, contractual obligation to an entity. They do have a legal right over you. They absolutely do, until the day that you renounce that. And there, you have to appeal to a higher authority. There is only one absolute highest authority that you can appeal to and ask him to cleanse that and void that contract and to purchase you a better one. But the reality is, you gave away something that wasn't yours to give away for in the first place. My soul was not mine. You know, so when I pledge my soul being my will, my mind, my emotions, not talking about my spirit in essence and of itself, talking about my will. I gave them my will. I gave them my power over my mind, that they would rule over me and have dominion over me. And in exchange, I would get something from them, right? That was what I signed up for. There's a lot of people that sign up for much worse deals in a sense. But that being said, you are selling something that was purchased by someone greater than you ever were. The one who purchased your soul owns it absolutely, and he is the absolute originator of your life itself. And he can buy back your soul from anything, period, because it says that after Jesus was destroyed upon that cross, that he went down into the earth, he walked down and heralded over them in victory those who were in chains of darkness, held in chains of darkness in Tartarus. Yes. I believe that is the watchers and the rebellious wicked ones who came down and had sex with women in Genesis 6 in the days of Noah and corrupted all flesh and all mankind, who seeded themselves into our bloodlines. These are what my family members' heraldry would prove. We are progenitors and keepers of the guilds of the seed of the serpent. My family were people that loved that, were proud of that. They believed that we in no way, shape, or form were carriers of that seed. And because of that, it gave us the divine right to rule. We could treat people however we wanted because they're goyim, they're cattle, they're the useless eaters. And we could dispose of them and use them in any way, shape, or form we wanted. That being said, God alone can redeem your soul, even from corruption at that level. And I'm a living witness of that. My child is a living witness to that you can break that cycle today and make a decision and turn your life away from that and leave it. Leave off of it and cling to one who is greater than that, who can purchase your soul back from them. When Jesus rose from the grave, he brought with him all those who were held captive. And it says he brought with him the keys of death. He brought him all of the power that death had held over the souls of man. He now controls it. He is the owner of it. And he is the greatest authority that you will ever need. He is the supreme ruler of that. And so I ask people, appeal to him and he will take care of you.
Yeah, no, incredible. Like, and when it comes to like these families, including yours, what was the end game? I mean, obviously being involved in Luciferianism and all the stuff they're involved with. What's the end game for them though? Why are they doing what they're doing?
My kingdom first.
Okay.
It's to build thy own kingdom and to rule over it, to climb. It's not that every person wants to be at the top of the pyramid of power. It's not that every family member is trying to breed a bloodline image keeper of the beast. It's not that every family has different agendas. A lot of them are just dog eat dog out there to be the best apex predator in their little tiny kingdom. A lot of them don't have the kind of agenda that people ascribe to them and thinking that they're all thinking about overtaking the world at any given moment. A lot of them just want to get theirs and to control it and own it and or create a generation that does likewise and builds on their kingdom. So each family has a very different set of ideologies that they ascribe to. And that's why I'm only specific to kind of what my family's ideology was. Sure. I didn't get a lot of those sit down conversations. My role in the family was to be a keeper of the secrets, to guard and protect the secrets, to guard and protect families and or coven members and make sure that loose lips weren't seeking ships and so on and so forth. So that was what I was entrusted with. I don't know what their main purpose and ideology and calling was ultimately culminating into, but that was what my purpose was gilded to be, basically the solutions provider for my families and work my way all the way up into the hierarchy of the military industrial complex, to put it nicely. That was where I was being groomed and gilded towards.
So you're more on maybe the secular level, because obviously there's all these different levels. And again, there is a spiritual component to this, but like what you're saying is not all family dynasties, might be spiritual in nature as far as their pursuits or their objectives.
Right.
Correct.
Right. Some of them, it's just very, very much business is business.
Correct. But there is some sort of hierarchy, though. I mean, they would answer to someone else, would they not?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
They still all have their handlers. Even when you think you're kind of arriving at some apex, you realize that you're just going to get another handler.
So you're probably on like, you might think you're way up there on the totem pole, but you might be way down. Like, it's compartmentalized is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Even within those families, it's very compartmentalized as far as the power.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's how they're able to stay hidden so well. Because at the end of the day, it's just like you unzip a drug ring by, you arrest one low level guy who turns over his dealer, and you're trying to unzip the chain. It's the same thing. You use compartmentalization so that you can only unzip so far, and then it breaks off and there's nobody there above that you know of.
Yeah.
And so you assume you've caught the big fish. You assume you've arrived at some pinnacle of power. And the reality is you're still on the far outer rings. And that's how their kingdom's built.
So when they have those circles of protection, that ultimately they just, like you said, they remain anonymous, they remain secretive and protected.
Yeah.
When did
And
you start?
sometimes
When
they might
did you
throw
start
somebody under
though,
the bus.
Nathan? When did you start researching? And I'm not saying your family, but I'm just saying Jesuits, Illuminati, like all these different type of bloodline type families. When did you start researching into them and kind of finding exposing, like you said, the darkness, exposing the lies? When was it? Was it more recent, like in the last 5 years, or were you kind of
In the last 10
peeking
years.
Okay, okay. And what was it
Yeah.
like for you when you started looking into it? Was there something that you aligned with, something that you were surprised with, something that you learned from looking into it? I'm talking about other stuff outside of even your family that you were finding out what was in operation that all kind of made sense. Kind of piece the puzzle together, maybe where your family was on that totem pole.
Well, I think kind of in a main way, the big issue that kind of kicked my family's front door in was vaccines being mandated on healthcare workers. My wife was a nurse at the time, and they mandated that the healthcare workers in the United States, they're very, very big at mandatory vaccinations for healthcare providers, workers, specifically the nurses and doctors. And my wife had, up until that point, never had a flu shot and never had the flu. She got the flu shot, didn't really think about much of it, and then got the flu and nearly died. And so it was a very rude awakening for my family. And it sent Chelsea and I into this complete other realm of researching all these what are considered fringe topics. And at the same time, it pissed us off to a huge degree to wonder why the heck are they mandating something like this for the healthcare providers? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of that was actually the original kind of issue that started in my house that actually kind of brought a lot of this out into the surface, was trying to understand why they were making us put these things in our bodies against our own personal choice and convictions for the sake of the good, quote unquote. And you start to really study and start to peel that horrifying onion apart, and you realize that these are part of a much larger mechanism to this system. Yeah. And so that was kind of the first main, I call it the spidery web of the kingdom of darkness. And you start grabbing onto one of the, the threads dangling out there in the wind. And all of a sudden you realize that you're caught up in this web, and it goes in every direction, and it's more terrifying and insidious than anything you could have comprehended. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the time for my wife and I, and we started researching into a lot of these other areas from there.
What was it like for your wife's family, like when they found out about all of this? Like, obviously, I'm sure they've read your book, or I don't know at what point all this started coming out with her family. Obviously, this was private between you and Chelsea for a while, but at some point, now it's public. What was their reaction? Because I'm sure, I don't know much about her family, but were they more just kind of just every typical, Christian family, or I'm not sure what her story was like with her family, but I'm sure they were somewhat shocked at the level of what you've been involved with.
It was really hard. There's no way around it. It was absolutely brutal. And in the beginning, they were incredibly supportive of me and very, very understanding, and were just an unbelievable blessing. My family members began to really start to work them over at that same time frame, and it got really messy really fast. And so it was really hard for her family to try to understand a lot of this. Yeah, because in one sense, they're very unaware of the reality of a lot of things in the world. They understand some aspects of it, but it's still very hard for them to break out of kind of the normal mindset that most family members of any of us are in. Yeah. And so on one side of it, it is a very hard pill to swallow. Over the last, I would say, year, though, things tremendously have improved in that situation. Them beginning to read my book and actually get to an understanding of this, then having lots of other people in their lives or people surrounding them where this is becoming more and more known. What's good about all this is, yes, I can turn on Netflix today and go watch, and there is black magic sex rituals being done in front of your eyes on Netflix anytime you want. And these shows that are teaching people openly how to engage in rituals to contact the other side and have these beings begin to engage with you, and how to do every level of that is being poured out continually on our televisions, on our phones, and our iPads, and it's inundating every person if they want it. And so it's not something I have to convince people of. More and more people are coming forward talking about this stuff and talking about these abuse and these things in their backgrounds that, yes, are very occultic in nature. And it's not that grandpa abusing so-and-so had anything to do with any spiritual beings. Sometimes it's just basic horrible family abuse that's happening. But on another side, there's a lot of ritualistic abuse that's going on behind the scenes that people can research and study and look at and verify and talk about. Why are the cartels down in South America and south of the border here in the States using massive amounts of rituals to cover and conceal their trafficking operations that are going on? Why are they using Dios de Muerte, the Day of the Dead, and to summon these spirits to cloak and conceal their activities? Why are they worshiping the goddess of death and the reaper, and they're imbuing themselves with the power to do this stuff? This stuff is normalizing across our country. It's becoming normal. And so her family on one side is being able to learn about this stuff obliquely from the normal mainstream media and or people around them, and also seeing what I'm talking about validated. And so it's been a process for them in their own way to come to that. But thankfully they do support Chelsea and I, and are an amazing people for that in our lives. But that didn't come at a cost. I'll tell you what, they paid a price to get there, and so does anybody who deals with this.
I can only imagine. And you mentioned that, you've heard some stories, but I would imagine that it's really rewarding for you when all of a sudden you do have people that reach out to you, and maybe you can.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Robbie.
I guess get bold, or, sorry, they're just wanting to come out, hearing your story.
Yeah.
Sorry, but yeah, like that's what I'm saying is
your question.
Yeah, your book is based on that, but obviously reaching out to other people that were affected, whether it was sexual abuse or whether it was getting into ceremonial type ritualistic abuse and stuff like this. People reaching out to you, I'm sure that's very rewarding for you when you hear people that are really touched, by the hand of the Father through your book.
It's rewarding in one way. It's also very, very sad in other ways, because you start to understand how much more prevalent this is than you really realize. And as much as we can talk about this stuff is going on everywhere, well, then when you start getting, a dozen or 2 dozen emails from people in South Africa all of a sudden who are talking about this and going through and saying stories that I never publicly spoke about, things I've never written about. And it's like they're reading from, they're telling me my story without even knowing me. And it's somebody that lives 3,000 miles away, has no idea what I went through. And they live the same life that I did in so many ways. And so on one side, it's very comforting to know other people have lived this. On the other side, it's horrifying, because you start to realize that I've got somebody in Southern Australia talking about this coven who operates in the same type of manner that people that are here, in the Southwest doing 10 years ago, and they're trying to understand, and what do they do and how do they fight back against that? It is so pervasive. It would boggle people's mind if they ever actually had a real clue of understanding of what was going on here and how much this is going on to people that are neighbors next door. Like not a joke, like your neighbor next door might come over and have had this stuff going on with them their whole life. My family was that neighbor next door for a lot of Americans. We moved constantly. We were a lot of friendly neighbor faces next door for people. And if they ever looked closely and saw that, it would have rocked their world. And I hope, and I try to aspire people to pay attention, to look closer, to look a little bit deeper than that surface glance, and to think maybe that person actually has a story. Maybe that person's living through some things that I am here and placed in their life for such a time as this, to be someone that's consistent, to be someone that cares about them, to be someone that loves on them and is willing to care about them more than I care about my next 10 minutes of free time. And I get it. Everybody's busy out there, but you got to start looking at people as in a serious and understanding way, because that is what God is wanting us to do, to be ambassadors of Him on this earth that are willing to serve and protect and love and take care of the people that are entrusted to us.
Yeah, amen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing, like you mentioned, being an ambassador, but being a witness and just being there, because there's a lot of people out there that are hurting, that horrific things have happened to them, and they desperately want to be free.
Yeah, that's an important point too, because even with all my years of pastoral experience and even starting off as a police officer and an investigator for child abuse and neglect, I didn't have the experiences that you had, Nathan, and you have knowledge and personal experience that only someone like yourself can help someone else walk through what they're going through. And so it's beautiful to see how, like you said earlier in the broadcast, God can turn something that was horrible into a blessing. And, that scripture that talks about, God comforts us, and in turn, basically, we're able to comfort others, with the same comfort that we were comforted with. And so, I have the ability to reach certain people, right? And to be just the listening ear they need, or just the person who's, giving, pastoral wisdom. But for others, they need someone like yourself, or they need Robbie Davidson. And so it's beautiful how he uses our experiences, our talents, our gifts, to reach the people that really need to be, reached at that time.
And part of that also is that you guys don't squander the platform that he's entrusted to you. We each of us is accountable for those opportunities wasted as much as the ones that we took advantage of, and that's why I'm very, very intentional anytime I have an opportunity to speak, to thank the people who were forerunners ahead of me that showed me what it was like to be courageous. And that was the crux of what made me make that decision, was I saw these people, these believers of truth that were out there, that were willing to suffer the scourge of public mocking. I talk about, it's like you're stepping into we don't have coliseums necessarily like they did in Rome. We have coliseums of public opinion. Yes. And when you wage into those things, man, you are going to get the snot kicked out of you. There is no way around it, because you can't please an audience. You can never make everyone in an audience happy. You can't do it, man. You cannot do it. And that being said, you guys take a message of truth. You take what you believe in, you put it out there, regardless of the response, regardless of the retributions and the reprisals. You guys face that down, and you're willing to continue to do that. And because of that, people that are in the worlds like I came from, people look at you guys and they go, oh my gosh, maybe there's such a thing as a passionate, devoted, strong, and capable man of God. Maybe there's a lot more power in the kingdom of heaven than ever I've really taken a serious look at. That guy inspires the heck out of me. That guy is courageous. That woman is so bold for what she believes in, that she is getting persecuted and having to wear a mask over her face for 6 months out of the year because she won't take a shot that she believes is full of aborted human babies and animal DNA, and she refuses to put that in her body. She refuses to put that in her children, and she suffers for the sake of that. Or she is someone who is willing to homeschool her children because she can't send her kids to school because of what she believes in. Man, that's conviction. That's conviction, and that is intoxicating. And you know what? It's rare. It's rare to see people that have good, outstanding moral truths that they believe in sacrifice for those. And when you see it, it's infectious, and people want to be around it. They want to know more about it. I wanted to be around people that believed and lived their life in accordance with their beliefs, and were willing to suffer for it, and also were willing to be blessed by it. So I hope each of you that hears this is willing to take that same kind of boldness, take that same kind of courage, and be willing to share it with the people that are in your sphere of influence, the people you can bring that to. Take that message to them because you care about them. Tell them the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amen. I always sit there and say, I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't in the scriptures. That's standing on the word of God, is standing on the truth. And, like I said, Jesus was mocked and laughed and ridiculed, and, a lot worse happened to him. And to me, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to stand on the truth of his word, And no matter what kind of public scrutiny we get, like you said before, it is rare. It is rare, and it is tough. But we're not, to be leaning on our own understanding or strength. We're to, lean on the Father's, right? And again, that's the whole thing here, is that we can go based on His will, on His strength. We can basically seek His, truth in all things. And that's what really gets us through, because I'll tell you, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for Him. Period. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
That's the same thing with you, Nathan, or Pastor Nate. All of it, it comes from Him above, and that's what the blessing is. And to be able just to be obedient and follow His will for our lives is important. And what I always look at is, what about the ripple effect? You wrote a book. I've wrote a book. I've come out documentaries, done this, but really, it's His words that speak through us. Whether it's the words on the page, whether it's watching a documentary, whether it's doing a sermon, even this is His words. And truly, the ripple effect. How many people are going to be impacted and changed for eternity? So many. And again, it's all worth it if it's just one. For me, it's amazing if one person's life is changed for eternity and they come to the saving knowledge. That one person, it was all worth it. One person.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, that we're transparent, because like you said, we're serving by the strength which God supplies. That's scripture right there. It's not by our strength, and we all have our weak moments, and some of the talks that I'll be giving, even tomorrow at this meetup, really kind of beginning. But, I'll be talking about, hey, it hasn't been easy, and, there's times when I don't feel motivated, there's times when a week goes by, and you're feeling discouraged and your energy is sapped, and, you have to really just buckle down in prayer and and get that encouragement. And, the Father has to kind of just, give you that boost and get you back on track. And like you said, Nathan, the realization of, why should I get back in the mix after feeling knocked down? Because other people's lives and souls are depending on it, and God can use someone else. But like you said, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that, servant that squandered, that buried the talents that I was given.
Right.
I want to bring as much glory as I can to Him and help others in the process.
Absolutely. Because we inherently know there's an accounting coming for each of us.
Yeah.
That we do have to give an account for every idle word. It says every idle word that came out of our mouths. And I've had a lot of just idle words, just wasted time, wasted words for no apparent reason, but like, I'll just share this with you. I was flying up to Canada on my way to this conference, and I'll be honest with you guys. I'm at a time in my life, a very big transition point. My wife is pregnant again. We've got another child on the way. It's a very exciting time, but there's a lot of changes going on in our lives. Getting geared up and getting ready for this conference was quite a workout. And by the time I actually got on the plane, I was so exhausted and just really wanted to actually get some rest before getting up there, because I knew anybody who's been to a conference knows it's kind of nonstop. Yeah, Robbie, I don't think Robbie ever slept at his conference when he was here in Denver. I've seen that guy go like 4 days without sleeping, because you're just talking with people and all this stuff is happening, and it's a really exciting time. And I knew that was coming, and I kind of just wanted to do my thing on the plane. And young guy sat down next to me, and really sharp guy, really articulate. And it was very clear. I thought he'd had some law enforcement background or military background, and come to find out he was basically a prison officer in Canada, on the far eastern side of Canada, and he had just been out here in Colorado, and so he was really excited to talk about it. Well, he asked me what I was doing, and I shared a little bit about it, but to be honest with you guys, a lot of times I keep things very vague when I talk to people about what I'm doing or what my background is, just to feel the waters out a little bit. But him and I ended up talking for almost an hour and a half, and at the end of it, I gave him a copy of my book, because I felt like that's something I needed to do for him. Well, I got a text, nothing, I didn't hear anything about him. 2 weeks go by, and I get a text from him that all of this unbelievable change that has happened in his life from that moment, from that exact moment. He said, my entire life has changed. I read your entire book. He said, and I for the first time in my life, I finally have an understanding about all these things that have been going on and these dots that had never been connected. And he starts pouring his heart out about all these things that had come up for him. And he'd given up on the faith. He hadn't been to a church since he was 6 years old, and he had no relationship with God whatsoever. And it kind of abandoned that lifestyle and that mentality completely. And because of our conversation on the plane, and because God was stirring stuff in his heart, man, it brought him to this revelation of faith, and he has completely transformed his mental state and his spiritual state to where he wants a relationship with the God that he only heard about. Now he believes it's something attainable for him. And that came because I was willing to take that time, and in spite of my exhaustion and in spite of where I was at mentally in that moment, I was willing to try to just be a good, sincere friend to this person. For the little window, I've got a captured audience. Each of you has little windows like that you need to try to seize and take advantage of and make the most of it. Because listen to me, a lot of people woke up on days not knowing that was the day they were going to die. But I woke up knowing and thinking about that person's day of death and their moment of death. I knew their time was coming, and there was a literal timer on their life, and they were going to expire at the end of it. I know that feeling. Each of us should have that in our forefront of our mind on a regular basis, because it's coming for you. And you need to know that, hey, at the end of it, I want to rest knowing I did everything I could to the fullest of my ability with what I was entrusted to make a difference in this world. And so I hope each of you that listens to this will do the same.
Absolutely, man. That is just absolutely the truth. I couldn't have said it better. Let's real quick before the end of the show here, give out any pertinent links to your website, YouTube channel, any other information for people to contact you or learn more about you, Nathan.
Absolutely. For those of you guys who want to kind of keep up with my book, you can go to snatchedfromtheflames.com. I have the whole book there available for free, so don't let that be an excuse or a reason you can't get it. But you can go to Amazon as well to purchase it. And my YouTube channel is Nathan Reynolds. So just look up Nathan Reynolds, and you guys can keep along with us there. So
awesome.
Thanks again, Robbie, for having me.
Oh,
and Pastor Nate as well.
Thanks for coming on, Ben.
Yeah, great having you. Take care, everyone. We'll talk to you next week when we do it again. Blessings to everyone.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Don't miss Celebrate Truth with Robbie Davidson and Pastor Nate every Saturday, 7 to 9 Pacific, 10 to midnight Eastern on Revolution Radio. They talk the Bible and how it exposes a lot of lies in the world with special guests, roundtable discussions, and call-ins from you, the listeners. This is not your typical Christian radio show. Celebrate Truth with Robbie Davidson and Pastor Nate every Saturday from 7 till 9 p.m. Pacific, 10 midnight Eastern on Revolution Radio.